Hey, so to start us off, I'll be going over how the floor system for Kitty Fighting Club works. So in front of me here, I have a flowchart which describes how the flow of the floor system works. So we start here at start floor, and first we're gonna initialize the level of difficulty and any saved progress. So the saved progress includes the floor number the player has been reached, the HP that they have remaining, the catnip that they have remaining, and the pufferfish they have remaining. So if the player clears the level, the floor number is increased and progress is saved to a file, and then the loop starts again. And if the player gets game over, then they are asked if they want to try again or return to the main menu. And if they click try again, the save progress is reset and the loop begins once more. And if they return to main menu, their save progress is also reset and they return to the main menu. I will now give a brief overview of the code for the floor system and how it all fits together. So first there's a static class called floor system, which basically is static so that the data persists between different scenes. And so we have a few variables here, which are the values that count as the saved progress that we want to initialize each new level. So how much HP the player has remaining, what floor number they're currently on, and the tacticals they have remaining, the pufferfish and the catnip. Here we have a bool method, which returns if there's any progress if there's a progress file saved at all. This is used to enable the continue button on the main menu if there is saved progress in a file. Next we have the floor cleared function, which is, it declares the current floor has been cleared and it saves the progress to the file. So it takes in some new values for the HP, pufferfish and catnip. It sets the variables, so the floor number is the same floor number plus 1, the HP is the new HP, etc. And the saved data is updated. And then we have the reset state method, which resets all the variables back to their default variables and deletes the saved data progress file, basically. So this is used when the game is over or if the player tries to start a new game. Then we have the save high score function, which is used to save a new high score in the leaderboard with the username that the player set and the current floor number. So here is the progress class, which floor system has an instance of. So this handles the saving and loading of progress data from a file. So we have the get saved data function here, which if the progress file exists, it's going to open it, deserialize it, set the floor system values to what is in the file, and then we have update saved data to floor system state. So this is, it creates the progress file if it already exists, then it's just going to overwrite it basically. And it sets the values in the file to the values in the floor system state. And it serializes it and closes it. Then we have a function for deleting the saved data, so if the file exists, it just deletes it. And this class is just defining how the saved data is going to be stored within that file. To demonstrate, I will now play the game to show you that the values do persist between levels. So, starting a level. Oh, I took damage. And then we'll see when we get to the next level. My HP bar is still lowered. Floor number now says 2. I can use my catnip. And if I go to the next level, you'll see that I have 0 catnip left. And now I still have 0 catnip left. And there you go.
Hello and welcome to the combat section of the dev walkthrough. I'm Chris and I'm the project manager for Kitty Fighting Club. We'll dive right in. So we've got player combat here. Alongside the variables, we've got stuff such as attack point and attack range, enemy layers to ensure that only the enemies are attacked, attack cooldown so we can't spam, the animation controls and the audio sources and particle systems are implemented here as well. So when a player attacks, what does it do? Well, it checks to see if any enemies are in the collider hit enemies. If there is, we do damage to these enemies. If we are equipping our big heavy sawfish, we will deal significantly more damage here. If we, however, we are equipping our dual smaller and faster blades, we do a little bit less damage here. When the contact is made, we instantiate the particle system for the enemy that's hit, and we get the particle systems and play that effect. Once we've played the effect, we'll destroy the particle system, and that's the end of that one. This one's for our critical hit, so when you jump and you attack, if it hits, it becomes a critical hit, which is a random damage specified between these two values here. So with the heavier sword, you do between 12 and 15, and with the smaller dual blades, you do between 7 and 10. Again, we instantiate the particle systems to show that the enemy's been hit, but we also add a critical hit particle system to show that it's a critical hit. We play the effects and we destroy the particles. And whether the enemy's been hit, whether critical hit or normally hit, we play the audio source for the enemy, meow. So that's pretty much a brief. We've got a cooldown here as well, obviously, so you can't spam, and the attack really runs well with the animations. So that's pretty much player combat script done. We've got our enemy combat, which is pretty much a similar layout and similar format to the player combat, except it has a bit of a detection because no one's controlling it. So if it detects the player, it will chase and attack. Again, there's particle system prefabs and audios. We also got 2 additional variables here. So if the enemy cat has got a sawfish, it stores the damage for that sawfish. If it's got sabers, then it stores the sabers and does the damage accordingly. So it detects the enemies in the range of the attack for any player in the hit player and deal damage based on the weapon that's got equipped. Again, it will instantiate the particle system for the player that's being hit, play the particle system, and then destroy it so it doesn't stay in the game. And again, that is the enemy combat. They've also got a if you can't be found, it won't follow you anymore. And also it has a cooldown as well, because if you're not allowed to spam attack the enemy, then the enemy sure as hell can't spam attack you. The boss combat, kudos to Chloe and Raz for this one, is a lot more in boss mode, I guess you would call it. There's a screen shake that sets up, and the noise when the club comes crashing down is fantastic. Does significantly more damage. He doesn't move, but again, if the player takes the hit, the audio plays and the particle system instantiates and repeats. And then we've got just our quick catnip and pufferfish scripts. So this one is all the catnip stuff. It's got the catnip theme and the sniff audio sources. So when you use it, you apply the catnip. The game object catnip will fall out. You'll have a 5-second movement buff, and once that's done, you'll go back to normal speed, and the normal level theme will play. With the pufferfish, a little bit more. So you actually have an aim line that comes up by pressing the E button. You hold that, and then it'll show you the brief direction of where the pufferfish is thrown. By clicking the left mouse button, you'll throw the pufferfish, and hopefully you'll hit an enemy. So the next part is I'll take you through the game. I'll just show you a brief demonstration of the combat as well as the boss fight, and I'll see you there. So at the player combat and the enemy combat, a brief demonstration of what I'm going to show you. What I'm going to do is, to be able to show you the player movement, is I'm going to turn the chase range down of the enemy to 0. This will stop him chasing us, and I can focus on explaining to you the weapons and such. So we'll go right in. Load up. The enemy won't chase us due to things. So this is our sawfish. As you can see, it's a slow attacking animation. By rapidly tapping left click, I'm not spamming. I'm not able to. It's definitely a slow movement one compared to the dual blades. By pressing Q, I've swapped over there, and they're much faster of an attack, but less damaging. In my tactical items here, you can see that I've got the pufferfish. By pressing R, I can go to the catnip. But if I hold E here, you can see that I've got a line. This line here indicates where the pufferfish goes, and if I left click, boom, right on the target, and he does this little poison dance. If I go to the catnip here and I press E, you'll hear a theme and a brief movement speed increase. Much more faster, get around the map much better. And yeah, back to normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of here. I'm just going to put the chase range back to 20 so I can show you how the enemy combat works. So I'm straight in, no messing around. He's clocked me, he's going to try and attack me. If he hits me, a lot more damage there, and it really hurts. I can try and escape him. If I can lose him, he'll eventually, hopefully, if I can take some catnip, he'll lose me and he'll give up the chase. And he will just stand in an idle animation state until he clocks me again. As soon as he clocks me again, he's back on me and he's attacking me. So that's the player and the enemy combat there on just a brief demonstration. I will see you for the next part, which is the boss combat. So here I've just changed the scripting a little bit, so when I press play we will load up floor 10, which will be the first boss level. Load up. And we are in. As you can see, we've got two little enemies chasing us. And Dr. Whisk is the boss of Cat Scratchman Post. And as you can see, he did significant damage there because I failed to jump. If I jump, I do dodge. Very, very tough game. But yeah, this brief demonstration of the combat, player, enemy, and boss. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'll give you a brief explanation for the player and enemy movement today. For the enemy movement, we have declared the transform player, which has the role of telling the nav mesh where the player is. So it knows to follow its position basically. The animator has the role of adding animations based on the actions that the enemy does, if it's running, if it's staying, or so on. And we have added different variables here, which have the role of adding different forces or different restraints for our nav mesh. In the start method, we initialize the nav mesh and we set its stopping distance to the stopping distance we declared above. In the fixed update method, we start by checking if the enemy is moving or staying still, basically, in order to set its idle or running animation, basically. We then measure the distance to the player, check if the distance to the player is smaller than the chase range. If so, we transform the rotation towards the player, basically, so the enemy gradually start facing towards the player, and we set the destination to the player position, so it starts running to the player itself. In the last if else here, we check if the distance to the player is smaller than a certain value, which is 3 in this statement. If this is true, basically, we reset the bools for the animations, and then we enter kind of in a combat scenario. So it will animate the slashing or stabbing based on what weapon does the enemy have at the moment. The player movement. In the player movement script, we have start by adding variables which have the purpose of adding somewhat of a physics to our character. For example, the move speed, the ground drag, the jump force, gravity, and so on, basically. We have added the transform, which tells us which face, which is the face of the object, which is the face of the character. So we know we binded the jump key to the space bar. We check what is ground, basically, for when we jump, and as well as the animator, which has the role of animating the character. In the start method, we initialize the rigid body as well as we freeze its rotation, and we make it ready to jump. In the update method, we check when the player is touching the ground with the grounded thing. So if it's touching the ground, we reset the trigger to its jumping, so it will stay idle. If it's not touching the ground, it will jump, basically. It will go into a jumping state. We also add my input and speed control methods, which I'll cover a little bit later. In the fixed update method, we add the move player, because in here we are working with adding forces towards a rigid body. So fixed method is the good, it's the good method to use in this case, basically. My input method, basically, my input method declares the horizontal and vertical input based on the input system that Unity offers. The if-else statement here, in these methods, this statement has the role of checking which animation should be playing, and the last if statement checks if the player is able to jump, and if so, it calls the jump method once the jump is held, basically. The move player method adds forces to a rigid body, whether it's grounded or in air, basically. The speed control keeps the rigid body at a steady speed, so it does not keep accelerating above fixed movement speed, basically. And the jump method here resets all the animations and gets the character, adds the forces necessarily for the character to move off ground, basically. It just adds an impulse to it so it jumps. And now let's do a walkthrough in the game where we can see how we actually move, jump, and how the enemy works, basically. As you can see, if I'm getting closer to it, it will move towards me and hit me, and actually hit me hard. Our character can move around, on WSD I can move towards all directions, and pressing space will catapult me in air and I'll jump. Yes, this is all of the functionality. Thank you.